how many senses, biological senses, do we have?
I believe we have 5. But...
We have 5. Sound, or hearing, tactile, touch, taste, smell, and sight.
Right.
The sixth sense is the mystery sense. It's the one that people sometimes say they have an extra perception. And for him, the extra perception is, I jokingly say, interplanar. It's he can see the dead.
Welcome. This is A Lost Plot, the podcast where cinematic plots are taken apart piece by piece to determine what makes that movie great or why it has been forgotten today.
We're back, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot. I am your host, Maverick, here with our most benevolent of guests, Patrick.
That's an interesting word to describe me in this podcast. With my rants.
Earlier conversation about the blood and gore on the streets. That was appropriate.
I mean, of course it is. At this point, it shouldn't be a surprise.
That's all we go for. Today we are reviewing a absolute classic, The Sixth Sense, released in 1999. It's written by M. Night. I don't even know. How do you normally say this guy's name? Shyamalan?
I usually say Shyamalan.
Shyamalan?
It's like Shyamalan, so it's
Shyamalan.
Melon.
So,
or I usually just go like Shyamalama Ding Dong, and people automatically know who I'm talking about for some reason. So
yeah, see, if you just say M. Night, then everyone knows as well, and you have to avoid the name.
The plot
no
twist
offense,
for that
I'm not trying. I guess I did just kind of make fun of your last name. People make fun of my last name. Whatever.
It happens.
It happens. Great guy. Love him to death. Do I know him personally? No. Anyways, also directed by M. Night, starring Bruce Willis as Dr. Malcolm Crowe, Haley Joel Osment as Cole Sear. It was Sear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Toni Collette as Lynn Sear, Olivia Williams as Anna Crowe, and the summary, my good man.
So, The Sixth Sense is a thriller, horror, kind of mystery film about a psychologist who is treating a boy named Cole, who is living with his single mother, played by Toni Collette, Lynn Sear. He has some sort of issue that kind of gets alluded to throughout the start of the movie. Bruce Willis has this ordeal of trying to figure out what's going on, and eventually, it's from 1999. There's no huge spoiler as far as like what the problem is, and that is that Cole, as an adorable child, by the way, he's adorable in the film, can see dead people. And Dr. Malcolm Crowe has to go through the process of seeing if he's mentally ill or not. And so the plot follows him trying to solve that issue with Cole. And a lot of dark things ensue. A lot of very interesting things ensue. And this movie has a reputation for its third and final act being kind of mind-bending. So
nice. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, honestly, the beginning starts off with Dr. Malcolm Crowe at the beginning getting his award from the city of Philadelphia, blah blah blah. When he gets home, he's hanging out with his wife, and then an old patient arrives there.
Played by Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah,
young Donnie Wahlberg.
Short little bit, but enough to have an impact on the movie. That's for sure.
Yeah, real impact.
He holds a grudge and shoots him. What did you think? As an opening for the movie, how do you think that they did in setting that stage?
I always love a cold open. I love a cold open, and in this one, I liked it because when you go into this movie, and when you would have gone into this movie when it first came out, you already know The Sixth Sense already kind of has an air of supernatural horror to it. And then the first horror that you see is a break-in and an assault in the home.
Right.
And for me, I
violating the
love that
sanctity of the
grounding.
home.
Exactly. And I love that
Mhm.
makes it more grounded in reality. To kind of
Right.
bring to perspective that this film isn't too far from reality.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I
it's
really like this cold open.
no, I'm generally a fan of where you can. I don't know if I'd always call it a cold open, but definitely like having that more intense opener. I don't like the let's set the stage of whatever like the Guardians of the Galaxy openers where they have the fun little bit at the beginning and it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we're having a good time, but we're saving the galaxy.
It
They're
plays all of its
fine.
cards in the opening, and then it's just kind of like, now let's look at each card individually. That's Guardians of
Yeah,
the Galaxy. This movie
yeah,
does not do that,
yeah, not at
and I
all.
love that.
Yeah, no,
Well,
definitely.
actually, it kind of doesn't do that.
Well, so that's actually the thing. So, okay, anyone watching, obviously, spoilers, but this came out in
Yes.
1999, right? Okay,
You have
also,
no
as a
excuse at
side,
this point.
that being said, I have been told the ending of this movie multiple times, and I forgot
Good.
multiple times.
I showed
So,
this to some friends, actually, some very sheltered friends that we were talking about earlier,
uh-huh.
um, as an introduction to horror in a way that's like more approachable. And the best thing about showing sheltered people this movie, it's a very easy to watch movie.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
it's not really, it doesn't have a lot of like controversial stuff in it. It doesn't have a lot of stuff that,
No.
if you're worried about content, it's not violent, it's not overly sexual or anything.
Right.
It's really approachable.
It's a good
And
family
if you're
movie.
sheltered, you don't know anything about it, and that makes it even better. So when you show a room full of people this, and one of the people watching it forgets while he's watching it that he was told the plot twist a long time ago, and he forgot it. So when it hits him so much harder. One person said, how did he say it? Like, I'm out of breath. That was overwhelming. And I was like, yes, that's what I wanted to see. That's what this movie, that's what it was like then. Because
Right,
when I
right.
watched it, I already knew it was happening because I I watched my parents watch it. Whoops.
Right.
As a kid. So I saw the twist as a kid. Whoops.
Hence his affinity to horror.
Exactly.
His
But
baseline was up
it
here.
was it was so high at a young age, which is weird. But I never got to experience it the way I watched those people experience it.
Right.
This movie is very special in that way for me, as like I didn't experience it, but every time I watch it, I just get a little closer to imagining what it was like when you first saw this in theaters,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and I love it. And it
Yeah.
all starts with an opening that plays it plays two hands at the same time, but you don't realize it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that this opening to this movie is the key to understanding the rest of it without realizing that you need a key to understand the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say my thoughts about the conclusion now, but after explaining that, I do feel like it's appropriate to just explain it at the end what my thoughts were. So we'll hold off on that.
Yeah.
It really the compelling moment that gets everyone involved in it. I'm not sure if you want to put that when Cole reveals to Dr. Malcolm or when Cole agrees to work with Dr. Malcolm. I thought that that's when they really get initiated as a real conflict, was when he actually starts working with him. But I think a case can be made for the other.
That's an
Would love
interesting
your
point.
thoughts.
I view the conflict as there's a bunch of different conflicts happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And you could break it into two different plot lines or two different journeys that the characters are going through.
Right.
One journey is Cole trying to be comfortable enough to talk about things, even with his mother.
Interesting. True. Okay.
And that also reflects by him having to talk to the doctor, because he doesn't talk to Dr. Malcolm for a time. He doesn't reveal anything to Dr. Malcolm for a time.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he doesn't reveal anything to his mother either.
Right.
So he does the therapy thing where any child psychologist has to gain the trust of the child and keep things that the child says away from the parent.
Right.
And I don't remember if he explains that to Cole, but that's kind of a thing that you'd assume if it's a child psychologist. So he assists in the other thing where he's not talking to his parents. He doesn't trust anyone. The trust thing is the first one, and the second one is seeing dead people. You know, pretty equal problems, I'd say.
Right.
So I can't really say for certain because it could have gone either way. It could have been that he kept saying to his mom that I see dead people, and the therapist gets called in to deal with that.
Right.
But because then that's already like they don't believe him, so there's a breach of trust there, and then they could just they could handle it in reverse. So the way I see it is they're connected, but it's two separate conflicts that free floating could have gone either way regardless.
Right.
It's hard to pick one over the other as to where things really kick off, though. I'd say if you're going for like the basic gist of the movie, it kicks off when it's revealed that to the psychiatrist, Dr. Malcolm Crowe, that he sees dead people.
Yeah.
But him being there in the first place is also a catalyst for that to happen. So it really could go either way, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that whole subplot of Cole with his mom and that relationship is an excellent point too, just because of how much that plays into it's in regards to subplots. I would say this one's excellent just because it's so intricately tied to the primary plot that in some ways you almost forget that it's kind of tangential because it's so related, which in all honesty, good subplots should be. They should be so directly weaved together that when one thing happens, it can affect the other and vice versa. And you see them growing together as Cole and Malcolm figure out this relationship with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And also props to Toni Collette. She kills it in these kinds of movies. She kills it in horror, drama, thrillers. I just had some friends watch Hereditary the other night.
Oh gosh!
And again, she kills it in these sorts of things. Like she kills it in this one. She made some people cry.
Kills it.
She literally kills it. No, the biker was someone else. She did that. Anyways, yeah, it's just the subplots, these little tangential, air quotes, tangential plot lines that happen. Especially in this movie, there's actually a few. And the way they all interconnect in this movie is masterfully interwoven, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are some theories and things that kind of like turn it on its head for me when I watched it like the 10th time. Because, because I have no sense of proportion and my hubris is overwhelming. So
nice.
There's some things that I want to watch this movie again and kind of look at things from a different light regarding how these things intertwine. But overall, on like your first viewing, it just works out really well, and I really enjoy how it works out.
Yeah. So. And another side note, not relevant to the plot, but I just think it's worth mentioning, is this movie's only like an hour and a half, hour 45 maybe, something like that.
It's 1 hour and 47 minutes.
There you go.
Yeah.
A lot of movies nowadays, they don't need to be the 2.5 hour long, 3 hour long movie to tell a good story. You can still get the hour 45. Well, actually, I don't know if you think this is a good story or not. We haven't gotten there, but you know, you could tell a cohesive story in an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And people can leave, at least some of them will leave awestruck. You know?
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Yeah,
we don't need,
I agree. You don't need to overpad it. You don't need to have filler or anything like that. If it needs to be 2 hours because it needs to be 2 hours and that's how you can get everything in it, all right, as long as it's done well. I can't really use Beau is Afraid as an example because that's a very different beast, but that's the most recent one that comes to mind that was like 3.5 hours long, I think.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen Beau is Afraid, so I don't have a reference.
I don't think you'd need to. I liked it, but I'm me, and don't let that be a gauge for what you should watch.
So, what is this? Just like a axe wielding maniac for 2 hours?
No,
the whole 3.5.
No, And you know what? I'm not even going to get to it on the podcast. If you want to look it
That's
up,
for next time.
look it up. I won't make anyone watch that movie. It was a dedication, and I had 3 drinks while watching it.
Okay, so it helped. It helped to get through it.
Sure. So, anyways, The Sixth Sense.
That's right. The Sixth Sense.
Subplots, good
Right.
acting, very good acting. Props to Haley Joel Osment. He's phenomenal in this movie.
Yes.
He played scared so well because that's what he is.
Yeah.
So,
as a child actor, he was amazing. Incredible.
Very good. And also just like in the movie, he's adorable. And then there's this sad moment at the beginning when you're introduced to him. He's getting sent to school, and his mom, waits to send him out for his friend to show up and walk with him to school. And then, he waves at his mom, says like, "Goodbye, Mrs. Whatever." And then when you get an intimate view of the conversation that's happening, Cole has paid the kid to pretend to be his friend so that he can walk to school and not have to deal with having to make her drive.
Right.
And that's just so sad, but it's kind of funny in my eyes too. Which is a bit messed up for me to say, but
it's just so odd. It's like what who does? I mean, I didn't walk to school, so I don't have that reference point. But it's just such an odd concept to me. It was like,
and that's more of a thing for New York specifically, which is where I believe this movie takes place, or like Boston or something like that. But it's in a condensed city. They're in townhouses and stuff, so I think they're in like an apartment building. No, Philadelphia.
So it makes sense.
Philadelphia, right?
That's
we brought that up earlier.
They're in Philly.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the whole thing of like in New York, if you live in New York, and especially in downtown New York, you don't drive. You either walk or you take a cab. Or you take public transportation because it's just a pain to drive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anyways,
we get to the point where Haley Joel Osment's character Cole confesses to Dr. Malcolm, "I see dead people." That was the real like turning point in Malcolm's journey here, where he starts to investigate this as a very specific, I guess, psychotic muse of the child and trying to figure out why that's the case. How do you feel like that, especially that moment? It changed. I mean, I guess it doesn't change a lot of the movie, but it's a big part of the movie.
It changes the dynamic from it being a mystery to it having an element of horror to it. Because we also have the 2 perspectives. This movie has a brilliant use of an unreliable narrator.
Of an unreliable?
Yes.
Being what? The camera? Or what are you saying specifically?
We follow...
Or Malcolm?
Malcolm.
Right.
Who is the epitome of an unreliable narrator in this situation, trying to understand a situation that he cannot conceptualize.
Right.
So we have the perspective of that as our grounding, and then we have the vignettes of things that happen to Cole in between sessions with Dr. Malcolm. And Dr. Malcolm can neither confirm nor deny any of that because he's not there. Why he isn't there, that's to be said later. And that's the thing where I run into issues is with how the unreliable narrator function works in this movie.
Interesting. And so I will say, I've only watched this once.
Yes.
So you have a lot more thought process behind your critique on this than I do.
Boy, I'm going to make you think, man.
Let's do it. So, I mean, there's a couple key points. I think it's important to note. I think it is interesting to note that the only times you're really seeing the dead people is when you're seeing it from Cole's perspective, right? You're not seeing it when Malcolm's there, which is obvious to some degree, but even more so as the story progresses.
And it doesn't help either that Malcolm has the experience and education of a person who has dealt with things like this already,
Right.
because it is revealed as he investigates these sorts of claims that the guy that broke into the house at the beginning had suffered the same thing.
Was it the exact same thing?
Yes, it was. He wasn't as put together as Cole was, because he was already dealing with some other mental health issues. Because there is a point where Malcolm, and we can go over the broad strokes of it, or we can go into the nitty gritty. Actually, I'll ask you first before I get into this point.
That's
Would you
fine. Yeah,
rather?
just
All
go
right.
into it. Just go into
All
it.
right, broad strokes. Dr. Malcolm begins to investigate these claims of him seeing dead people. And when he goes back
Right.
into his files, he comes across the character played by Donnie Wahlberg, Vincent. Vincent
Yeah, right.
complains of the same things, but he's also acting as a schizophrenic as well, so he doesn't take it as seriously. And then Malcolm listens to the tape recordings of a session he had with Vincent, and on the
Right,
tape
right.
recordings, Malcolm leaves to go do something for some paperwork, and Vincent continues talking to somebody, and as Malcolm listens closer, you can hear the dead people talking to Vincent.
Right. Right.
Which,
That was like a key point. That was
yes,
when Malcolm starts to realize that, hey, there's maybe something to this
there's,
rather than
yeah,
just
rather than just he's mentally ill.
right. So maybe state again where you were going with, or maybe you'll state this at the end. Because it really all comes to a head soon after that, anyways. Where
What I'm stating is in relation to one of the first things that is brought up when he says, "I see dead people. They walk by me in the streets. They sometimes don't even know they are dead." So I think we should address the thing before we go any further.
I'm not sure if you're talking about the revelation or if you're talking
I'm
about
talking about
something.
the revelation.
Okay, yeah. So I mean,
I'll let you.
why are
do
you
this.
watching this if you haven't
If you
seen
don't
it
know,
already? If
come
you
on.
don't know, what are you doing? He's dead.
Dr. Malcolm died at the beginning of the movie. He got shot
Yes.
and died.
Yes.
And there's hints dropped the entire film that he is not really there, visible to anyone else but Cole, who can see dead people.
Right.
And part of the way that the dead people are dealt with, Cole helps them to move on.
Right.
And Dr. Malcolm doesn't know he's dead, and in order for him to move on, he wants to take this case that he believes is a real case and help this child to overcome his fears and his issues. And then, it's never stated, but that's his journey so that he can move on, is to
Right.
help a kid move on. So through the movie,
Well, so wasn't the idea was that he wasn't actually helping dead people move on until Malcolm came along, or is that just my
yes,
understanding?
no, he wasn't helping dead people move on because he didn't
Okay.
understand what was happening. Because it was
Gotcha.
Malcolm that suggested maybe you should try talking back to them.
Right.
And that had the first time that
I
happened
see.
was with the vomiting girl in the tent, who,
Right.
by the way, is one of the biggest jump scares in the movie, and it's not even a jump scare. It's just gross and overwhelming,
Yeah.
and the build up
Yeah.
to it was so good.
Yeah.
So
Actually, so I'm a huge critique of horror movies. That personally, when she started barfing, kind of took me out of the movie.
Looks like
And
oatmeal.
I was like, that's just gross.
That's it. Being gross took you out of the movie.
Yeah, I was like, come on, of all things to freak me out with, you have her barfing. What are we doing here? I mean, I understand.
But then it's justified why in the film.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it
dude,
is.
If it being gross takes you out of the movie, I have some suggestions for you, bud. You heard what I said earlier.
All I'm saying is, it was good. I understand why it would be a jump scare. It was just for me personally. I was like, what's going on here? Um, Also, I want to say what I
Hmm.
was going to say earlier is
Yep.
that opener, after it happened, and then it said a year later or 6 months later, whatever it is, that for me was the most disorienting part of the entire movie.
Yep.
Was when he gets shot, and then the next thing you know, he's walking. Because I was just sitting there going, didn't he just die? I guess he didn't die. He,
Yep.
I mean, he's walking, so he must not have died.
So
But
the
why
food
did
for
we just
thought
go
things.
from here to this? Like,
This is the food for thought portion of it, because
uh-huh.
when you really start to break it down, there's a lot of stuff that is just not explained.
Right. Which isn't always bad.
It's not always bad, and that's the thing is, one of the issues that I run into when I try to critique the timeline of this movie and the functionality of what the dead people see, we're
Hmm.
already seeing from an unreliable narrator who doesn't recognize that he's dead.
Right. Absolutely.
Our perspective is already really warped in a way that we're not even sure of yet,
Yeah.
because never once through the movie do we question what happens between scenes with Malcolm. What does he perceive?
The dead people. You're
No,
talking about.
no, no, just Malcolm in between, like when he
Oh,
first
Malcolm.
meets with Cole and
Oh,
his
you mean
mom.
like with his wife and things like
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
what happens in between? How much time passes in between? We don't know any of that.
True.
The only perspective we get is when Bruce Willis's character goes and does a thing, or we go and see from a reliable narrator, Cole, who actually sees dead people.
Hmm.
How does time work? Well, remember, in the school, Cole brought up that it used to be a courthouse and they did hangings there. And then when you see the ghosts that were hanged, sorry, proper
Right.
grammar, they're all in their old attire and they look like they just died.
Right.
So I think we can, just by that alone, I think we can get a brief understanding that a dead person in this universe, their concept of time is, I'd say, non-linear.
You mean like they're stuck in a period of time that
No,
they're of their
they
own?
don't live on one point in a timeline. They don't live going one direction. They just experience things when they experience them. And that is what dementia is.
Interesting. I don't know if I should laugh at that.
You already did. No, it reminded me of the movie The Father with Anthony Hopkins. Very much recommend that movie. It's very sad, but it's a point of view perspective of what it's like to have dementia. And
Yeah, I bet that'd be intense.
it's really intense, but it very much mirrors what the ghosts deal with, because they don't have a concept of time anymore. They don't know they're dead. How do they not know they're dead if they're living their life?
Uh-huh.
How
Yeah.
does Malcolm not know he's dead? Well, he only sees exactly what we see, and he just fills in the gaps probably. But that's it.
You mean
So
plus seeing dead people, right?
plus, well, Malcolm doesn't see the dead people.
Okay, sorry. You're right. You said
Yeah.
Malcolm. I thought you said Cole.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so the ghosts in this one are like non-linear in their time, so it's kind of harder to even comprehend. But also, I am a corporeal being living in a three-dimensional world on a timeline that is going one direction.
Right.
I cannot even begin to comprehend how that would even be if we were no longer corporeal. So
Right.
there's
Right.
liberty to take in that, where you can just say, well, that's how ghosts are. And I would be content with that. But my over-analyzing brain is like, but hold on, how do they perceive between scenes? How does Cole, how does Malcolm,
Uh-huh.
if he's dead, go from not, like, how did he get into the house when he first met Cole? And how
Yeah.
did he not take anything weird in
Right.
that situation
Well,
as a red flag?
because he tries to open that door previously and he's unable to.
He's unable
Or
to.
not previously, but later in the movie.
Yeah, the door to the
yeah.
basement.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. That's
It's the whole. I think it's partially non-linear time, but also denial of being dead. The
right.
denial of the reality
Right.
that he lives now or doesn't live, but it's and because of that, he has to justify it to himself in a way that makes whatever he's experiencing less impactful and less
Right.
traumatizing for him.
Right. I think, yeah, there is some level of, like, you can justify, this could have happened or that could have happened to explain
Yeah.
how they got into the room or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think that's a much better way to go about it, is to
Oh, yeah.
say, like, there's just not necessarily a denial, but like an understanding in their
Yeah.
universe of things.
That's
In a completely
kind of
different
where
way.
I've been leaning, is like, they're so dead. What was it? I see dumb people. They're so dumb they walk by me in the streets. They're so dumb they don't even know they're dumb.
Uh-huh.
Derived from the I see dead people, but they don't even realize they're dead. A lot of that, and especially in like classic ghost stories and stuff too, it's because they don't want to think they're dead, and so they remain because they are, they have unfinished business or whatever. And
Yeah.
I think this kind of deals with that too, where there's a denial, and that
Yeah.
denial keeps them there up until they complete what they need to, as Cole helps them to do, and then they can move on,
Yeah.
to move past that. So the best example of that in this movie, apart from Dr. Malcolm, because that's kind of like a gut punch when it happens, is when the vomiting girl shows up and Cole helps her out, and she basically guides him to her funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the funeral scene a lot.
Really?
It's
Okay.
screwed
So-
up what happens there, and I love that.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going.
Cole goes to
I
this
think I
funeral for this
disagree with
girl.
you, but keep
That's
going.
fine. That's fine. Opinions are fine, and yours, it could be wrong. It might be, but I'll accept it. You're forgiven. I'm kidding. That's all perfect for discussion. Cole goes to this funeral and just walks in, which I understand that that's really weird that he just walks into somebody's funeral.
Sure.
Says that he is the girl's friend, which at that point he's not lying.
Right.
And discovers a videotape in a box that he gives to the dad, because that's what the girl was wanting him to find and reveal. So then the dad goes to watch this videotape after Cole tells him, she wanted you to have this. And the videotape reveals that the girl that died was recording herself doing like little puppet shows, and leaves the camera running. And then you watch as the mother comes in and puts rat poison in her oatmeal, and then feeds the oatmeal to the girl, keeping the girl sick, Munchausen by proxy, and inevitably killing her.
Right.
And then the dad confronts the mom, and we don't see how that goes.
Right.
Because we don't need to.
Right. From what I read, I thought that was a stepmom technically for reviewer standpoint, but I could be completely wrong on that. If it's not, it's completely psychopathic for a mother to do that.
Look
it's
into
still
Munchausen by proxy. Sadly, it happens a lot. It's actually terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the
do not censor yourself for the sake of making me feel comfortable. I don't care.
No. I'm more just like, how do I? What was my first question when I hit this scene? This scene was just such a whole, like, it was good in some ways, right? Because it explained a lot and like helped develop the plot in the direction they were trying to go. But in some ways, I just felt like it was so out of left field that I wasn't sure how it fit into the regular workings of Cole and Malcolm as a duo. And so, like, questions about, like, how did Cole get there? How did the tape get recorded? Why was the mom pouring the rat poison in front of the camera instead of, like, right before she gives it to her, instead of in the kitchen? Or, like,
okay, I think I have an answer for each of those questions.
Okay, and then my other question that I had was, like, did any of that actually happen, or was that just part of Malcolm's imagination as he was progressing down this path after he realizes some of this is true?
Okay, so first of all, how did he get there? Public transportation is easily accessible for children in places like that.
Okay,
he probably
right. That's
has
the easiest one. Yeah.
That's the easiest one. What was that second one? How did she record it?
Yeah.
She left the camera running. It was behind a dollhouse.
Right. Right. I mean,
So
I
partially
understand.
obscures it too.
Uh-huh.
Then the question becomes, how did he get a hold of it? How did the tape get in there? Rat poisoning doesn't instantly kill you.
Right.
So
Right.
she probably stashed it like in a between place after it ran out of tape. Why would a mom do that?
Right.
Or
Well,
why
so
would a
then,
stepmom do that? That's definitely like a lot more of like a serious actual real world issue that we run into. You were going to say something.
no, I guess it's like at that point, is the recording a thing that the dead version of the woman is then cognizant of that the living version of the girl was not aware of?
Oh no,
Um,
I think at the point that you see it, she runs and hides and obscures the camera. I think because the girl knows she's being poisoned, and because she knows she's being poisoned, she hides the camera so that it records mom doing the thing. And then she has more of the poison, and now it's recorded, so she stashes it and hides it.
mhm.
And I think what one of the things that might have happened, and there's no way you can really get an answer for this, but in my
Right.
speculation, I think her intention was for it to be discovered by her dad in some way, maybe cleaning out the room after she dies, whatever. But I don't think she planned to be a ghost, and I don't think she.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't intend to be, but if I am, you bet your bottom dollar I'm gonna go scare some people. I already have a list.
Let's get this done.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I think she was aware of it. She didn't
Uh-huh.
seem like she
Yeah.
was ignorant to it.
Okay.
Otherwise, how would she have known what to guide Cole to look for?
Right, right. Obviously she's not
So
unaware of it to some
basically,
degree.
basically, I think it's pretty simple in that she knows, and she did her best to hide a recording because she wanted to catch her in the act. Um, and that comes to the question of why would a mom do that, or why would a parent do that?
Right. I mean, it seems innocent enough when she's just recording the
I think that's part of the ploy.
dollhouses and her doing her play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are decent. They're not the worst explanations. I think they
No,
justify a lot. And
it's
I do think you should give a movie leniency if you can have
yeah,
some reasonable explanation in your mind as to why
especially when
something
you
could have happened.
throw in the fact that it's Munchausen by proxy, which
Hmm.
Munchausen syndrome is a situation in which a person constantly makes themselves sick for attention, or as we refer to either in like the courtroom setting, for secondary or primary gain.
Hmm.
So sympathy, some people when they get sick or act sick, like the entirety of Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah,
If it was a habitual thing and he was doing it like impulsively, that'd be Munchausen, faking
right,
being sick or making yourself sick with outside sources for attention.
right.
Munchausen by proxy is when a parent does that to a child. There are many cases where that happened. There's a case that happened, I believe, in like Wisconsin, where a
Uh-huh.
mother was slowly feeding her child drain cleaner and keeping her child sick and in the hospital. And when the hospitals would start to suspect that the mom was doing this, um, there's like a bunch of specific laws and things that make it really difficult for hospitals to call it out. But when she would suspect that they were catching on, she would throw legal terminology that makes it very difficult to work with, and then she'd take them to another hospital. And she kept this going until the daughter died.
Whoa.
That is a thing that happens a lot. Not a ton, a lot. So, Sixth Sense touching on that was very harsh, but was pretty realistic in how it was done. Another thing that does that is Stephen King's It. If you haven't seen that, there's a kid that is the fixation of Munchausen by proxy, and you can get a different perspective from that movie. A less accurate perspective, but even still. So,
Which one?
Eddie, the one
I,
that's sickly. Did you which one did you watch?
both.
The
Oh,
the
no, no, no.
1990
Oh,
the
no, no,
1990
no, no,
version
no,
and
no, no. Sorry, sorry. There was it and it too. That's what I was thinking of. The new
It
one.
chapter. Yeah. Okay, so the kid that says they're gazebos. in the first one, where he has the cast on his arm because he breaks it when he fights when they fight Pennywise in the house.
Okay,
He is the fixation of a mother who has Munchausen by proxy.
Okay.
She keeps him sick and convinces him he's sick so that he can get medicine, which is later revealed to be placebo. So the mother in The Sixth Sense, in that case, not Cole's mom, but the girl who died, that's what she has. So completely understandable if you didn't quite know what that was. Munchausen by proxy isn't a really well-known thing, but that's what it was.
Right,
and
right.
That's why I said that particular section gets very dark because of that. Because I read about cases about that all the time, and it's very hard as a studying forensic psychologist to confront that. There's not a lot of good battles and arguments for or against it in court is the problem. So anyways, out of that dark pit, he helps the girl reveal that the mom has been poisoning her, and she is able to move on. And that brings us to this concept of Cole
resolving
these issues for ghosts and talking to them. And at a certain point, he is comfortable enough to not need to talk to Dr. Malcolm Crowe anymore. And there's this like heartfelt scene where Cole is in a school play, and he lifts the sword from the stone in an Arthur play, a King Arthur play.
Right.
And they pretend that they're going to see each other the next day, even though it's going to be their last meeting. So Malcolm Crowe concludes his time with Cole in this very sad but very bittersweet ending to their relationship of doctor and patient. And then he goes back home relieved that he was able to help someone, unlike how he was able to help Vincent, who, by the way, we forgot to say, at the beginning, after he shoots Malcolm, he shoots himself and kills himself.
Right.
So Malcolm feels like he didn't save this guy, and he feels like he's failed him, and he wants to be successful, and that's his tie. That's what ties him to the world still. That gets concluded, and then he goes home and has a very sad apology to his wife, who says, "Why did you leave me?" He says, "I didn't." And then it's revealed that she's holding his wedding ring, and he hasn't been wearing it the whole time.
Yeah.
And
that's the first time where it's like he sees her physically have something that he should have.
Yes.
But when he realizes
the veil is lifted.
Yeah, he physically sees he no longer has it. You know, that veil that, like you said, that Cole says, "Oh, they don't realize that they're dead."
Mm-hmm. I think it also echoes that like literal line when he's going through the existential crisis that is, "Oh, I do not exist anymore." I think you hear Cole actually like repeat that in his head.
Okay, that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, just because it's like, hey, if you didn't get it by now, we'll put the line there too.
Right. Let's put it out in bold colors right here.
Yep.
Like, this is what's going on.
And then going through that, he kind of has flashbacks to his other interactions he's had, which what it really seemed like was just Anna, Malcolm's wife, was very... It was framed that she was not content with their marriage, and that she was seeing another guy, and he was like an hour late to their anniversary, and she just says, "Happy anniversary," slams the checkbook closed and leaves. And you're like, "Oh crap, this marriage ain't going too well." And then he revisits those, realizing that she is still faithful to him, but he's actually gone, and she's just miserable because he's gone. And none of it is because she's bitter, but it's because she's trying to start a new life, and she turned down going out with that one dude that she met at like work or something like that.
That seems so interesting because it takes it from almost like the struggle of the unfaithful marriage to this woman
that's a really faithful marriage to a tragic point.
Exactly. And it turns the whole relationship on its head. I mean, the whole movie itself has just been turned on its head, but in so many different ways.
It flips so many, because again, interweaving like subplots, you have Malcolm becoming trusting of being able to talk to his mom, which he eventually does, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Malcolm, Cole. And then Malcolm trying to figure out what's going on with his relationship with his wife, and then the whole ordeal of the ghosts. The Vincent thing as like a small subplot to help explain later stuff, and just different layers like that. And then in one fell swoop, Malcolm is revealed to have been dead the whole time, upturning the entirety of how we perceived the primary threads of plot that were going through it, as well as Malcolm's subplot with his wife, as well as Cole not recognizing that Malcolm is dead.
Yeah.
Confirming what he says earlier, and it kind of like affects everything, because then it brings the conclusion of what that intro actually happened. Vincent killed Malcolm, and Vincent killed himself. I like to think that what Malcolm's goal as a ghost was basically the last things he thought when he died, which wasn't he's upset at Vincent. He failed Vincent, and he had to say that to Vincent before he got shot.
Right. And I kind of got that impression for. Yeah, I thought they kind of hinted at that for all of the ghosts. Just in that, like, the ones that are in their other positions, whether they're hanging or they're the girl who got poisoned by her stepmom, like, in all those situations, it's like a last.
Want to see my dad's gun?
Situation.
Turns around.
Oh yeah,
that one was. I liked that one a lot.
Bro, I didn't even think of that. Yep. Oh my gosh.
Yep. Last thing he thought. The last thing that went through his mind was actually lead, but the last thing he thought was, you know. You know which one I wanted to see, but we never got, but I'm also glad we didn't, was when the inciting incident of Cole talking to Dr. Malcolm and confessing that he sees ghosts is when he gets locked in the cabinet at the birthday party. And you hear the person in the cabinet.
Yeah, do you ever know who that is?
You never get to know.
And that's what you want to know.
I want to know, but I also love that I don't. And I love that. I love that a movie can make me feel that way.
Yeah. That's a great sign.
It is. So the last thing that really happens, because at this point we've exhausted most of like what happens with the plot. The conclusion, the main conclusion, comes when Toni Collette and Haley Joel Osment are in the car in the middle of traffic, which is 100% why you don't drive in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, or New Jersey. You don't do that.
Yeah.
They're stuck in traffic because an accident happened.
Bro.
Yeah, it's insane. New York is so much worse.
I believe that. But I was in Philly and I saw people jump out of their car, turn on their flashes, and walk into a store in the middle of the street. I'm like, only in Philadelphia. Here we go. All right.
Baby.
Go Eagles.
So they have a conversation because Cole's mom, Lynn, is like trying to see what's happening up ahead.
Right.
And you get a brief glimpse of it with a car that's like seeming it hit like a fire hydrant or something. You can tell it's swerved to miss something, whatever. But they're like 10 to 15 cars behind, so they don't get a good view of anything. And Toni Collette basically asks, like, what do you I'm trying to get a view of what happened there. And Cole finally says, there was an accident. There was a guy on a bike, or a girl on a bike, and she died. And Toni Collette says, wait, you can see that? And he goes, no. Then how do you know? She's standing right outside. And then she looks, and she gets freaked out. And then there's this whole conversation that ensues about, like, you know, that he can actually see the dead. And then Grandma gets brought up, saying that, where he says that Grandma was at his mom's like ballet recital or something before she died, and that there was like a phrase that the grandma told Lynn that nobody else heard, and she's never told anyone. And Cole tells that back to Lynn, who bursts into tears, realizing that her son actually has this ability. And they embrace, and they're a lot closer because now they're actually talking to each other and being honest with each other about it. And it's a terribly emotional scene that people were not expecting in a movie called The Sixth Sense about seeing ghosts. But it's not, for me, watching this movie again instills and finalizes my opinion that it is a drama first, a thriller second, and a horror third, or maybe even fourth.
Okay, I get on board with that 100%. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even still, it has some horror elements that work out pretty well, and I like that. So
See, I think that's good though. I think a great horror, like horror, in my mind, should be an element to a story. It
oh
shouldn't
yeah,
be the story,
like
and so that's where
I
it's
brought up
more.
Hereditary earlier.
Uh huh.
Hereditary is a drama. It's a
Hmm.
family drama. It is a thriller, and it is a horror. And each of those genres dominate specific sections of the movie, and you can
Okay.
break it down that way. And I'm not going to
Right.
spoil it, but when it wants to be a drama, it is a very depressing drama, and it stays very depressing very well. When it wants to be a thriller, it's very exciting, very tense. And when it wants to be a horror, oh my gosh, it is terrifying. And that's
Nice.
what makes it, is because a horror movie doesn't it should not just be, let's make it spooky.
Right.
There
Right. The
has to
jump
be more
scares and
to it.
everything. No, you
Yeah,
can't. That can't be the
you can't
substance of it.
make it like, I hope you, and if you ever are curious to watch it, I'll give you my opinion in private, but all I'm going to say is a movie that didn't have that balance for me, and a lot of people like it, and I get why, but it was a Terrifier.
I've not watched it, so don't know
I
what to say.
Yep, and we can talk about that later. But Terrifier is a movie for those that have seen it. I hope you all can understand. It doesn't balance really a lot of genre very well. It's a horror, it's a slasher, which is a subgenre of horror, but beyond that, that's about all it is. And it doesn't really bring anything else to the table. It doesn't bring a ton of plot, and I get why, but it wasn't as enjoyable for me because of that. And that's why I think The Sixth Sense is a very good example of like a good balance to it, so that it's not overwhelmingly just boo ah, I see dead people, scary jump scare or anything like that. It isn't. And you have to have those elements in there to tell a story that is compelling. And I
Yeah.
think this one is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
So
Great. Do you have like favorite characters? Someone you really enjoyed in the movie, someone you just hated in the movie, anyone that really like pissed you
okay.
off, or just like
Okay.
even you thought
The
was underdeveloped?
characters that pissed me off were the two
Here we
kids that locked
go.
Cole in the cabinet. I wanted to throw them down those stairs and give him a taste of the other side, you know?
There we go. There we go.
Um, as for favorite characters, like the main cast all did really well. Toni
Yeah.
Collette kills it whenever she's on scene. She's not a main character, but she is there a lot.
Yeah.
Honestly, of the two, Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment, I like Haley Joel Osment a lot in this one. I like him more than Bruce Willis in this one. That's not to discount Bruce Willis. He did really well too. But for such a young actor at the time, he really captured what he was supposed to be going for in that, and then some.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about you?
No, I loved, honestly, Haley Joel Osment took it for me. Just the emotion in the child's face and some of those
Yeah,
scenes.
he
I was
played
blown
scared
away.
so well.
Yeah. He's either like a really short, young looking kid and way older than he actually looks, or
Mm-hmm.
he's like 8 years old and freaking incredible at that point.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it's insane. His level of acting at that level at that age,
Yeah.
spectacular. So it's very, I think it's very hard for people to get good child actors, but when they do,
Yes.
they like use them because, like in a movie like this, they pay off huge.
They pay off
He,
huge, and they're just using a child actor is very important for telling a story like this. Where
right.
I mean, obviously, a child is an important part of it, but if it's an authentic child, if it's not, so like for example, a lot of like teen slasher movies use adults that play as teens,
Uh-huh.
and you can just tell, and it just doesn't work, and it's funny, but it takes you out of it. When
Uh-huh.
you do
Uh-huh.
something like this, where it takes itself more seriously, um, they have to have the right person, but they also have to make sure that they are around the age that they're playing,
Right.
because
Right.
Little things will happen, even very subtle things, small idiosyncratic behaviors that a child does that an adult doesn't. That's why. Do you remember the Polar Express?
Vaguely, yeah.
All the motion capture for all of the faces and things were done by Tom Hanks, including for the
Really?
kids. Yes. So if you watch it again and you just watch the faces, especially of the main character, they're very adult facial expressions. They're not kid facial expressions. It's
I
very
mean,
weird.
I recall that movie being slightly uncanny, but it has
Oh,
been
it's
a while.
very uncanny. It's not slightly, it remains very uncanny.
Okay, yeah,
But
I'm trying to be generous here.
here's the thing. Technologically, it was a fantastic movie. It brought
Yeah,
about a bunch of new
especially at
things,
the time.
but and that's the thing is, it's a product of its times. It's not a bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
I would never discount that. It's a very good movie. It's
Yeah.
just it's stuck in its times of the limitations of its technology, and it's uncanny. But I bring that up as an example of the fact that there's a difference in even the subtle things of like facial expressions that you get between an adult and a child. And to have Haley Joel Osment play it at around that age saved the movie in so many more ways than we can even begin to comprehend, because what we got was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
For what we got, it was pretty darn good, and a lot of it was because he had such a major role and he owned it the whole time.
Yeah.
And we have no way to compare what it could have been. And I don't want a way to compare what it could have been, because it's not that. We got what we got, and I'm happy with it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Love to see it. Themes. Any themes that you really just loved that this movie brought up?
I love the themes of like the parent-child relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
And just the trust that a child has or doesn't have. One of the things that gets brought up early on, I'm a big advocate for like training up your children in a specific way that is not harmful to them, as most people should be. So some people, when I watch this,
that's good.
yeah, it's weird. Treat people well, okay. They suspected that he was being abused at a certain point in the movie. And some people I know got upset at that for a reason that I have no idea. I was like, if I was a school nurse, I'd be thinking the same thing.
Right.
So then you go and confirm it, and then you realize Toni Collette is a struggling mom who is in a bad situation, trying to stay as close to her child as she can. And all of those scenes where it's just Toni Collette and Haley Joel Osment are very tender and very wholesome, but also so very sad. And that's just kind of like bringing into a bit more, maybe an inflated reality in some ways, but still not unrealistic, the very common issue of single parenting.
Right. Absolutely.
And dealing with that, and how he has to adjust to that.
Yeah.
Making Malcolm a father figure. So parenting type stuff getting brought up in that too. I like that. I like spooky. I just like spooky, okay? At this point, people know that now. It's unquestioned. I like the spooky in this movie. It does me a good spook. It doesn't really spook me because I have a lot of
spook.
It doesn't really scare me. I have a lot of horror experiences. It's a very tame movie, but it doesn't try to go more than it is in its tones, in its themes. I like that it flips the idea of the vengeful spirit and makes it that they're misunderstood and just needing closure. Yeah. I like that a lot. It's hard to pick out some themes sometimes in a movie like this, because there's so many different things that it brings about. Like mental health. We can talk about mental health and how this movie discusses that. Sure. We can look at how Vincent was treated, how he was failed, and how he went postal, went and shot Malcolm and then himself. That's not a thing. That's not a thing that's uncommon. That happens. Maybe not exactly finding your therapist and killing the therapist, but people get failed by the mental health system all the time. It happens because right now it's kind of a crap situation there. So there's discussion about that, how he treats Cole at first, and then
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
also ideas with like coming to terms with your fate,
Yes.
and the whole aspect of
Acceptance.
right, because there's a certain sense in which you see this obviously from the people who are dead,
Yeah.
right? They're clearly still around because they haven't come to terms with what happened in their life. But there's
Mhm.
also a sense in which of maybe not the same terms quite of coming to your fate, but like coming to terms with the fate of other people, where
Yeah.
what's her name? Tony Collette's character Lynn.
Mhm.
She is still trying to come to terms with what happened with her mother
Yes.
and how her relationship with that interacted, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this whole idea of being willing to face your fears or face your problems and coming to terms with that and
Mhm.
accepting that. And that is where you can find true rest because,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what all these people are looking for. They don't want to be caught up in this world when it's time for them to move on. They need to
Exactly.
figure out how to lay these things to rest. And
Yeah.
so there is that very strong message that's portrayed at the end of this movie, which I think, well, especially because for me, I don't know why I find stories about fate so
Mhm.
intriguing, but it's a classic from the days of the Greeks, right?
Oh yeah.
Where a lot of their stories were all about fate determining what was going to happen to you. And
You're gonna
so
need to watch Hereditary, man. Oh man. Oh
just
man.
exploring that idea is very
Yeah.
interesting to me, and this explores it in depth in its own way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it explores it in, I think, each of the different subplots in its own individual way. Because yeah,
Yeah.
again, another subplot being Tony Collette and her, I think it was grandmother. I don't think it was mother.
Okay.
I think it was
my bad. My bad.
Don't quote me on it. No, don't quote me
Uh-huh.
on it. I'm just saying, for some reason I feel like I remember it being grandmother. And yeah, I've watched it a bunch of times, but I am human. I am fallible. My memory is fallible. So
Right.
take that with a grain of salt. I'll verify it later. But yeah, there's an essence of fate acceptance in each of these different subplots,
Yeah.
and in the main plot, and in whatever little, not even smaller than subplots there are. And I
It's
love that.
riddled with it. Yeah.
It is. It really is. It's very nicely done in that way.
So here we go. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
We got 1, we got 10. Where do you put it? 10 is amazing.
Simply because there
1
are
is
some
crap.
aspects about the continuity of things that
Mhm.
still bother me.
Right.
I put this at, honestly, like 7.75 to 8.
Okay. That's a very respectable number in my book.
Okay.
Anything above a 6.5, you're starting to get into some nice territory.
Yeah. What about
Um,
you?
I give it an 8.7.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it's an excellent movie. It has a lot
Mm-hmm.
going for it. It explores a
Oh yeah.
lot of interesting ideas. Um, Even with your explanation, not a huge fan of
Yeah.
that scene with the girl. I think because of that, I would be willing to give it a little bit of grace. And then also, um, my brother did spoil it for me 10 minutes
Kill him.
before
Kill him.
the climax came out. So
How
there
dare
was
he?
that did piss me off.
How dare he? You
I-
can't put anything on the movie for that. That's your
no,
brother.
I can't. So
You
that's
have
the thing.
to rate
I
him lower.
yeah. So I think I naturally would have rated it slightly lower because
Mm-hmm.
my experience wasn't as good. But I know that if he hadn't said that in the middle of me
Mm-hmm.
watching it, it would have been a little bit higher. So because
Yeah.
of that, I give it an 8.7. I
Okay.
think it's an excellent movie. You should definitely at least
Yeah.
give it a view.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, please give it a view. It's not inaccessible. It's not like too weird that you're going to be like, "Oh, what am I watching?" No, it's a drama first. So there's a lot of like
Right.
relatable stuff going on and stuff that you can understand and relate to in some way. And then it kind of slowly starts to introduce its other cards.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoy this movie. Because I enjoy it so much, I've seen it so many times, and your second viewing will be very different because you'll know what to look for, and you'll see things that you are going to be like slapping yourself for realizing you missed.
Nice.
And
Okay, so
and I love that it can do that.
question for you.
Yes.
Why is it called The Sixth Sense?
Do you know the answer to this?
No,
or are you
I don't. I'm
So-
genuinely asking.
So, how many senses, biological senses, do we have?
I believe we have 5. But...
We have 5. Sound, or hearing, tactile, touch, taste,
Right.
smell, and sight.
Right.
The 6th sense is the mystery sense. It's the one that people sometimes say they have. They have an extra perception. And for him, the extra perception is, I jokingly say, interplanar. It's he can see the dead. He can see something that your eyes normally do not see. So it's an extra sight. It's an extra sense that he has.
Okay.
He can see the
Interesting.
unseen. Something that eyes don't normally perceive or hear. It's like almost like a different filter on all of his senses.
Okay.
So it's
I
a
was
sixth
just trying to
sense.
make sure it wasn't like it was pointing to something in specifics in the movie. That still is a very great explanation for the
at least that's how
description.
I've always read that sort of thing. Some people will jokingly say, "Oh, I've got a 6th sense for that kind of thing," and usually they're wrong. So feel free to tell them that, and then ask them if they see dead people. If they say no, then they have no valid opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
We
know what the 6th sense is.
Yeah,
at this point.
we know
Come
what
on,
it is
everyone.
now, and I want it.
I do not want it. And with that, we will see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
If you have a movie you want reviewed or have some feedback to give us, send us a message at alostplot.com. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review. It really helps other people find our podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to seeing you back with us next time. See you then.